The first time I had a chance to go through and see our new church building was last October, just over 4 months ago. At that time, I was just barely one of your part-time ministers. The inside of the building looked like a construction site. There were scaffolding in places where I expected to see open space. There were unfinished walls and rooms with no doors everywhere. There were nails and screws lying on the floors, which is normal in a construction site. I was told that they are gathered up every now and then using magnets so that they can be used. Building material was piled up here and there and all over in strategic places. I had trouble imagining exactly what the building was going to look like when it was finished. The second time that I was taken through our new church building was very recently, just over 2 weeks ago. And I found that the building looked like a construction site. I saw things that were new, things that looked a little more complete, but I still had to use a lot of imagination to see what it was going to look like when it was finished. My guides on the tour were very excited about what was there, and their excitement helped me to see what was still unfinished. But if you were to ask me to describe our new church building now, I would still say it's under construction. Sometimes what we see and what we know to be there are not always the same things. There are times when we have to do more than just look in order to see. And that's what this morning's gospel passage is all about. When Jesus took 3 of his disciples with him up onto a high mountain by themselves, they must have thought they already knew who Jesus was. 6 days earlier, after all, Peter had declared, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And he said this in response to the question, "Who do you say that I am?" The disciples had been following Jesus for some time now. They had seen him preaching, teaching, and healing, and they had seen him surrounded by people from all different walks of life. But when they saw him on this high mountain, they saw him in a completely different way. Not only did they see a complete change in Jesus' appearance, but they saw beyond Jesus. They saw where he fit in to God's bigger picture. They saw him in relation to and in conversation with Moses and Elijah, 2 of the most prominent and influential people in the history and in their faith. They saw Jesus making a difference in the world, and it was, to use a modern expression, a mind-blowing experience for the disciples. And as so often happens to us, when we are in an awesome place, when we are in a place of discovery, where new things are coming together and are working out, we want to stay. Peter did his best to make this happen. "Let us make 3 tents here," Peter said to Jesus, "one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." But in our scripture passage, mystery and the excitement for what is joyously possible is mingled with reality. The disciples are called on to take their mountaintop experience and all that excitement and go down into the valley where hard decisions of daily living have to be made. The wonder of our faith is that it brings together our urge to reach for the stars, to strive for the beyond, at the same time as we are firmly planted on the ground in a place where we depend on one another for our well-being. What the disciples got on the top of the mountain was a change in perspective. We need to look at ourselves. We need to look at our world from a bigger, wider point of view. And that is our reason for worship. In worship, we gain a new perspective. Worship helps us to see ourselves anew, to see God's world anew. That's why we come here. That's why we come here often, because there are constantly so many distractions and so many other voices in the world trying to convince us that we are less than we really are in God's eyes. In worship, we are reminded that we are all God's children, precious, beloved, and pleasing in God's sight, and that we are engaged in God's mission, not just our own efforts, that God's work in the world is accomplished as we come together with those around us and many others in the faith that we profess. As we come now to the fourth Sunday in our stewardship program, Windows on the Future, I invite you to remember all that you have heard in the presentations made so far. What you have heard is part of that vision, part of that brilliant sight of who we are and beyond who we are. What we are invited to do now is to go down into the valley and to make the kinds of decisions that we are being pushed or urged to do in faith. This past Wednesday, I'm hoping that everyone received the email that went out from the office. If that's not the case, I hope that we find out and that you do get a chance to see that email. It is about where we are now in the Windows to the Future campaign. It's inviting us to think of all of what we have heard so far as that marvelous vision of not only what we are doing, the outreach activities, the music, the study, the programs, the work that's happening together, but beyond that, where we are going and what we can be. And given that kind of vision, the concrete decisions that we have to be made can be expressed in the promise cards that were provided as a link in the email that went out on Wednesday. Any of you who have difficulty using the online link, we do have printed copies of the promise cards at the welcome table as well this morning. But that step requires us to go down into the valley. That step requires us to think of how the vision that we've had up on the mountain is playing out and can be made real in our midst. As I think about the future of Aurora United Church, one of the things that is in my mind the brilliant light and the most hopeful promise for us in the future is our place on Yonge Street, the heart of Aurora, the heart of our community and our town. Being on Yonge Street will enable us to speak to the community in very special ways. One of the questions that I've asked on a couple of occasions is, will there be a sign, an electronic sign that can change rapidly? Will there be a sign that at a time like this we can put up the message, prayers for Tumbler Ridge, BC? Can we put up the message, prayers for Iran, prayers for Ukraine, prayers for Gaza and Israel and so many other places in the world? Can our message be seen in a more clear way to the whole community, the community that drives by that spot almost every day in some cases? If those are the visions that you have caught in the words that have already been expressed in our stewardship campaign so far, then I invite us to move on down into the valley and to make those difficult decisions about how can we give. And there are more than one ways. Giving by pre-authorized remittance is one of the ones we are emphasizing this morning as we have distributed the cards to those who don't have or don't bring an envelope to put on the offering plate this morning. By pre-authorized remittance, the offering is the same, seen in a different way. But if we can give by online donation, we celebrate that this morning. If we give by placing the envelope onto the offering plate, let us see that in a bigger way than what we are often able to see on a Sunday morning. The promise cards, what we will fill out looking ahead to the future for possibly 3 years, are also the times when we are asked to make the difficult decisions in the valley that have been inspired from what we saw on the mountaintop. And as you go through the questions on that promise card, I sincerely hope that you take the time to reflect and to pray and to consider thoughtfully and carefully what we see in the life of Aurora United Church now and on into the future. Jesus took with him 3 disciples up onto the mountain. They might have thought they had heard everything that Jesus was going to say. They might have thought that they knew him better than anybody else in the world. But on that high place, they saw something more. They saw something beyond. They saw something different about what his place in the world could be and the difference that could be made in the decisions that they make in the valley around that vision and around that hope. Thanks be to God for this word.